We're developing a smart knee implant that's going to have an integrated AI ML software component to it. How do we go about defining a regulatory strategy for the US?
So we need to determine if the software fits the category of a medical device. This is based on the intended use and indications for use for your product. What sort of claims will you make for your product?
Just data collection and displaying objective kinematic data to support remote patient monitoring and activity tracking. We're not going to claim the data supporting any clinical decisions, but privacy and cybersecurity will be important as well.
The FDA's definition of a medical device includes implants and certain software products. Even though you are not providing a diagnosis or recommendation for treatment, your product is still intended to be used for monitoring after knee surgery. And the clinician will likely be taking this information to support further mitigations or treatment options. Therefore, this would meet the FDA's definition of a medical device. Let's take a look at that FDA criteria.
The Food and Drug Administration defines a medical device as an instrument, apparatus, implement, machine, contrivance, implant, in vitro reagent, or other similar or related article, including a component part or accessory, which is A. Recognized in the official national formulary or the United States Pharmacopoeia, or any supplement to them. B. Intended for use in the diagnosis of disease or other conditions, or in the cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or other animals. Or C. Intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals, and does not achieve its primary intended purposes through chemical action within or on the body of man or other animals, and which is not dependent upon being metabolized for the achievement of its primary intended purposes. The term device does not include software functions excluded pursuant to Section 5200.
How does that affect our regulatory strategy?
So next we need to determine if there's an applicable FDA regulation and product code. For example, based on a quick review of your product, it might be regulated under product code QPP, which is an implantable post-surgical kinematic measurement knee device. This is a Class 2 product code which requires a pre-market submission and a quality system compliant with 21 CFR 820. There are two primary pathways for a Class 2 device. If you can identify a similar device that's already marketed, you can use that device as a predicate device in a 510(k) submission. If there are no similar devices that are currently marketed, the other option is the de novo pathway.
What are the key considerations when evaluating if a predicate device is applicable?
Suitable predicate devices must have the same intended use and the same technological characteristics as the subject device. But there is a little wiggle room here because the FDA will also allow different technological characteristics if the new technology does not raise new questions of safety or efficacy. If there are multiple devices that are similar to your device, I often recommend using the most recent one because it reflects the most current FDA thinking. Plus, the 510(k) summaries that are publicly available for the more recent approvals often contain valuable insights into what the FDA requires regarding testing. In your 510(k) submission, you will submit comparison data demonstrating that the safety and efficacy of your device is substantially equivalent to your chosen predicate device. If you can't find a suitable predicate device, a 510(k) submission might not be an option. Devices that do not have suitable predicate devices are automatically classified as Class 3 devices. So although your device might meet the description in 21 CFR 888-3600, product code QPP, if the indications for use and/or the technology is not equivalent to a currently marketed device, the FDA might reject a 510(k) submission. That said, the FDA recognizes that many of these devices are still appropriate in a Class 2 designation and should not be subjected to a full PMA review. The alternative is to submit a de novo request for reclassification. In this case, there's no predicate device, and you will need to submit full safety and efficacy data for your device. If the FDA grants the reclassification order, your device will be classified as a Class 2 device, and you can avoid the lengthy and costly PMA process.
I did find a device with the same intended use and very similar technology. The implant materials are commonly used and the geometry itself will be very similar to our device. The only difference we know of is that the software can only be used on a local network while the patient is in the clinic, while ours is cloud-based. This adds the advantage of remote communication between the patient and the clinician. Does this sound like it would work as a predicate?
Of course, we would need to dig a little deeper to provide a definitive answer, but yes, it sounds like it would be a good candidate to review as a potential predicate device.
What are the implications of our device being targeted for the US versus OUS, and how does that impact the regulatory strategy?
Generally, most manufacturers either start with FDA marketing clearance or EU marketing clearance, and then consider other areas of opportunity. Some countries outside these two countries will either accept the 510(k) clearance or the CE certificate with little or no additional information required. In other countries, either of these submissions will, at a minimum, make the process easier because you will already have most of your testing done and may just need to copy and paste into country-specific formats. Your marketing team should be able to help determine the market potential in other countries, which will also help determine specific countries to target. We highly recommend having an overall regulatory strategy early in your process to create efficiencies and save extra time and costs.
How long will it take to get approved? Our PM needs this information to build out the project schedule.
Assuming your proposed predicate is suitable, you should plan for a 510(k) submission. You should allow time for design and development, formative and summative testing, human factors testing, software validation, etc. However, the gating factor is usually dependent upon the performance data required. Because this is a connected implant, you will need prospective clinical data from an IDE study. I would recommend a pre-submission meeting prior to initiating a clinical study so that you and the FDA are aligned regarding the data that will be suitable in your submission. In your pre-submission meeting request, you will submit your proposed clinical trial so that you can align on the objectives, endpoints, sample size, etc. The pre-submission process takes about 3 months from submission to completion. If you don't already have a quality system in place, you will need to establish a quality system compliant with FDA 21 CFR 820. This can be paper-based, but the majority of our clients decide to use an electronic system to manage their quality documentation, including their design history files. The earlier you establish your quality system, the easier it will be to maintain your records. You can then document the regulatory pathway and rationale in your product development plan or a standalone regulatory plan. One final note, remember that once you have 510(k) clearance, you are open to audits from the FDA, so you want your documentation to be complete and accurate.
Thanks again. This is all going to be very helpful.
You're welcome.